Little things like the Psalms, the writings, the history of Israel, like the books of Samuel and Kings, the prophetic books of Jeremiah, Isaiah, Ezekiel, and the minor prophets. The Pharisees accepted all of these, what might be called innovations to Israel's faith, but not the Sadducees. For them, the Scriptures consisted entirely of the 5 books of Moses, the first 5 books of the Bible. That's it. That's all they accepted. For the Sadducees, who were sad, you see, the things that could not be demonstrated by Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy was nothing but fanciful. It was a fabrication, a fiction. So in our little portion from the gospel today, we learn that Jesus managed to make everybody mad. Up to this point, he had made the Pharisees plenty mad. You whitewashed sepulchres, you brood of vipers. And today, the Sadducees, who were sad, you see. He managed to prove both of them wrong. And frankly, they were both legalistic in their own particular way. So I want to talk a little bit about this controversy that is brought to Jesus this morning about the meaning of marriage. What is marriage? What is marriage a symbol of? Because in the marriage ceremony itself, we say that this is a symbol of the union of God with His people, the union of Christ with His church. You see, throughout the Old Testament, Israel is referred to as the bride of God. Israel is unfaithful, she's disobedient, she's willful, she's hateful, she chases after other gods with distressing regularity. But in spite of it all, God, the almighty lover, keeps to His chosen bride. He cares for her, He courts her, He loves her, He gives Himself to her. He's faithful. And the New Testament continues that illustration, that metaphor, in that Christ becomes the bridegroom to His bride, the church, who, frankly, is not really a whole lot better wife. Does that clear things up a bit? So the Sadducees, who are sad, you see, are only mentioned in this one place in Luke's Gospel. And that's a little surprising. And here in this Gospel lesson today, our introduction to the Sadducees, according to Luke, is in the context of them setting a trap, a sort of a sneering sort of trap for Jesus. Now let me explain a little bit more about the Sadducees, because they were, frankly, the ruling class in Jesus' day. They're the priestly class, which is a little different from today. You see, in that day, the priests were the wealthy people. Oh, the good old days. Thank you. A little chuckle is helpful. They were the ruling class. They had charge of the temple and the temple treasury and all of the temple sacrifices. In Jesus' day, it was the Pharisees who were the middle class. It was the Sadducees, the priests, who were, shall we say, well-to-do. They had a temple. They ruled the worship of the Jewish people. Today we are in chapter 20 of Luke. Just before this little illustration, this little conflict, at the end of chapter 19, just before this happened, Jesus drove out the money changers in the temple. Guess whose pocket he got into with that little stunt? The Sadducees wanted to put him in his place. He was getting into their pockets, so to speak. So in our gospel today, that's the background. The Sadducees, who are sad, you see, they come to Jesus and they want to entrap him. They want to show him up. They want to ruin his reputation. Their little question about the woman and her 7 husbands, all of them brothers, has roots in the Old Testament, in Deuteronomy. And that had to do with preserving a brother's inheritance. You see, the inheritance was very important to the Jews in that day. And the inheritance of a man's house needed to stay with his house. If a man owned a piece of property and had no heirs, that piece of property didn't need to leave the family. So that was why this whole thing with a brother marrying the widowed wife and raising children for his brother so that there would be someone to inherit the family farm. Marrying a dead brother's wife and giving her a son was the way that ancient Israel saw to it that the family name and property were cared for. This argument style that the Sadducees used has a name. I learned about it when I was in college. If any of you have ever studied philosophy, you might have heard of reductio ad absurdum. Reduction to absurdity. So we take a little rule and we drag it out to its illogical conclusion, which is what the Sadducees did today. They applied the problem of the resurrection to this situation of preserving the inheritance, and they took it to its ridiculous end. I can only imagine that as they were arguing with Pharisees and other people, it was a very successful argument for them. And then they tried it on Jesus. As we have probably learned by now, that's not really a very smart thing to do, but they weren't very smart in that day. The problem for the Sadducees was that they phrased and couched the question in the wrong terms. They were not accustomed to thinking about life after death. In fact, they didn't believe in it. So they couched the whole thing in the terms of this life. They had never considered that life in the next life might be different from this one. They were sad, you see. You and I, we are accustomed to think of people, by the way, as possessions. Oh my. I love my wife, John. But I refer to her as my wife, as though she belonged to me. I'm glad she's not here this morning. Because I know she's really not, but that's the way we tend to refer to one another. The Sadducees thought of everyone as a spouse thinks of their other spouse as property. Way back yonder, oh my word, 25 years ago, can you imagine? 25 years ago, I had a conversation with Donna Eicher, the wife of Bishop Eicher, and she gave some really sound advice to me. This was my last year of seminary. And I think every clergyman's wife needs to hear this advice. I certainly have passed it along to Holly. She told me, Donna did, that people would regularly come up to her, attractive, young, female people would come up to her and would likewise, I told Holly, would likewise come up to Holly saying what a wonderful man she was married to. That they would tell Holly what a kind and generous and wise and handsome and intelligent. You get the point. What a wonderful man she was married to. And Mrs. Eicher, wise woman that she is, told me that I needed to tell my wife this. The thing for her to do was for the wife to hook her arm through the arm of her husband and look at him sweetly and lovingly, and that potential homewrecker, and say, yes, you are so right. And the wonderful thing is he's all mine. Little wisdom there, don't you think? And Donna went another step further with me. She said that when that sort of thing happens, remember this part, when this sort of thing happens, and when my wife gets me off by myself, after hearing all that praise, to make sure that I understand the reality of the situation, the reality of my wonderfulness and my wisdom and my beauty and blah, blah, blah. In short, that the wife should help her husband understand humility a little better. It really is helpful. Holly and Chelsea are supposed to enforce a no trespassing sign on their property. That's me, I'm property. But I encourage you guys, and I really encourage Holly, I will share this with her later, not to look at things quite that way. Under certain circumstances, it makes sense. But to say that those 7 brothers, quote, had her as wife, is a distortion of the truth. It's a twisting of the meaning of human marriage, particularly of Christian marriage. We are not married to be mutual possessors, mutual owners. We are not to own each other. We are not to be slaves to each other. Rather, we are to graciously and gratuitously give ourselves to each other. Y'all have heard me say before, the Valentine's be mine thing is malarkey. It is much better for us to say, I'm yours. We are called, in short, to be stewards of the gifts of God, and your spouse is God's greatest gift to you. One of the great economists of the past 50 years, I suppose, has a wonderful way of looking at this. God gave men women that they might become civilized. There's a lot of truth to that, don't you think? We're called to be stewards of God's gifts, and your spouse is your greatest gift. Is your spouse perfect? Shucks, no, nothing in this life is perfect. We ruin everything, don't we? But nonetheless, your spouse is supposed to be a gift from God, to do things to and for you, to toughen you perhaps, to instruct you maybe, to frustrate you, of course, to teach you patience, absolutely. So I want to leave y'all with this morning. Wives, consider your husbands. Husbands, consider your wives. They are not yours. They're not your possession. They're not even yours to keep. For at the resurrection, they will return to the source of the blessing. Your spouse is not yours. Your spouse is your blessing. Your spouse is the outpouring of God's love for you on this earth. And sometimes that's horribly spoiled, and I'm terribly sorry for all that. But that's the way of the world. That's the result of human sin. As that burning bush in the gospel this morning was not consumed, so God's love is inflamed for you, and His love is taught to you in that blessing, and you share life with that blessing. And I hope that throughout your life it seems to you that it is a blessing. Here in Ascension and St. Mark's, at the close of every service, I pray a little prayer that reminds us where our true native land is. Our true native land with Thee. Well, remember that phraseology. The household of God is your home. Your true spouse is Jesus Christ. You and I are all joined together, inflamed with love, taught to love by the author of love, and we frankly do it quite badly. Not perfect. Nothing in this world is. But here in the community of Christ, in the context of Christian service, in the context of Christian marriage, you and I are given a glimpse, and maybe it's a small foretaste, but we're given a glimpse of the greatest of all blessings that the Sadducees could never appreciate. Because they were sad, you see, because they didn't believe in the resurrection. They didn't believe in everlasting life. That's why they were sad, you see. Amen.
Amen.